tear it down and see what happened. Alright, so I started disassembling and I got the drive shaft off, drained the oil out of it, and got the inspection cover. The first thing you're going to want to do before you start touching any bolts is remove this inspection cover. Alright, and remove this cotter pin and this nut. This is the drive gear for the transfer case that attaches to the main shaft of the transmission. If you do not remove this nut and start pulling on the transfer case, you will pull out the main shaft enough to cause needle bearings to fall out of the input shaft to the engine. So if that happens, you're going to have to pull the transmission out and restack those needle bearings, which is a real pain. I'll go ahead and show you all what I'm talking about with those needle bearings in that input shaft. Alright, so I got a transmission main shaft and a input shaft. This is what goes into your pilot bushing and your flywheel, through the clutch, all that. So on this end here, this is where your transfer case gear goes. That's what I was showing you in the previous scene. Well, basically, this little pocket here has about a dozen or so needle bearings that go in here, and that's what puts everything together. And that, I mean, this is missing. It's missing another synchro ring and another sliding ring. This is actually your second gear on the transmission, so that's why it's important to make sure you undo that. And also, which I didn't show you, put the transmission in first gear. That's going to lock the forks, push this slide. This is the first gear here. This is going to lock everything together and aid in it. If for some reason you can't put the transmission in first gear, or you're not comfortable doing that, pull your top cover off, remove your shifter, and some people will either bungee cord the shift forks or actually put the sliding gear and anchor it with a bungee cord to something. So just a quick tip, because that happened to me, unfortunately, the first time I ever took one of these transfer cases off years ago, and it was a lesson I never forgot. Alright, so moving forward, first thing you're going to want to do is remove your clutch linkage. So basically the clutch pedal moves the linkage, and it's attached to the transfer case. Here's a fulcrum. So we're going to go ahead and remove the cotter pins. Take this little clevis pin out, then your clutch pedal just dropped. Alright, there's also going to be another cotter pin to remove on the linkage here. Alright, so next step, it's going to be two 5/16 bolts here. It's going to be a 1/2 inch wrench, and you're going to take them out. Now, what's different about the early Jeeps from the later Jeeps is if you loosen up this back one here, or completely take out this back one here and loosen up this one, you can just slide out this whole shaft and bracket. I'll show you the bracket here in a second. Alright, so it's basically just going to slide. Be mindful there's a spring. There's going to be a spring in this tube along with a felt washer. Alright, so now we're going to remove the main gear. I got the cotter pin taken out. Got the nut broke loose. It's very little torque goes on this. So alright, might have to put the transfer case in neutral. There we go. Alright. Next, we're going to remove these 3/8 bolts. That's what's holding on the transfer case of the transmission. So there's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, and a 5th one that's hidden back here. and one all the way down here. All right. And in case you were wondering, the size of that nut, it's an 1 5/16" socket. All right, before we take all our mating bolts out, we're going to go ahead and remove the transfer case mount. It's a 3/4 up top and a 15/16 below. All right. All right. So with this being, with the tub being off, it's going to be a little bit easier than the tub was on. So be mindful, we're going to try to hold the transmission shaft back. That main shaft I was telling you all about with my finger. There we go. It helps if you push on the bearing too. All right. All right, so we got the transfer case up on the workbench. First, we're going to remove the shift levers. It's just going to make it easier to finagle it on this table here. What you're going to do is there's supposed to be tie wire that travels all the way through the shifter housing and ends here to keep the shaft from backing out and also the bolts. So it's just a 5/16 wrench. Just going to go ahead and loosen that. And then, all right, before we do that, these are anti-rattle clips. These are basically keep tension on the shifters, keep them from rattling around, and also give you a better positive engagement when you go to shift it. So we're going to use this punch here. All right, so now we're going to take the oil pan off. Alright, now we're exposing all the gears, and let's investigate. Alright, so just as I expected, it looks like the intermediate gear here, the thrust is off. So basically, when this is your low range gear here, the straight cut gears, that's your low range, and then your spiral gears are your high range. So basically, when this is in low range, it's putting excessive thrusts on this intermediate gear and causing it to thrust, basically go back and forth like this. When I rebuilt this transfer case, I put a new intermediate shaft in it, new roller bearings, mic'd the intermediate gear on the inside, the bore of the inside, and also new thrust washers. So this is gonna probably be a little bit more in-depth than I was willing to go with this video, but Y'all are going to learn some things. We're going to have to do a full teardown on it to basically find the root cause of it. But here's the oil pan. You can see all the brass from the thrust washers, and also looks like maybe some steel chunks in here. That's not good because these parts are kind of expensive. So, all right. Well, before I start disassembling the main shaft here, we're going to go ahead and remove the intermediate shaft, and that's held in by this tab here with a 3/8 bolt. So we're just going to push it out. Alright, so when you get the pin all the way through, your thrust washers are going to fall down, and you're just going to grab the gear set and pull it out. So here's the intermediate gear. Set that off to the side. Thrust washers, as you can see, they look good. I don't see anything that's, really jumping out at me. So, alright, well, after further inspection, the cluster bearings here that the main shaft goes into, the intermediate shaft goes into, has a lot of play. So that's either telling me this cluster gear is wallered out, or these new bearings I purchased are out of spec. Either way is going to involve me inside miking the cluster gear and then miking the bearings. Unfortunately, right now I don't have an inside mic, so it's going to be a multi-part video. But before I go, I'm going to explain a couple differences with these transfer cases. So this transfer case here, this is a Dana 18. These were made from 1940 all the way up to 1971. There's a few variants. There's 3 different variants of them. This is the first variant. So the main thing you'll see is on the surface that mates up to the transmission. You'll see these 2 holes here in this little shaft. This transmission can only go with a T84 transmission that was found on the Willys MB and the 4GPW. So it's very important that you know what you have, and because it's not compatible. Another difference is the shaft size of the intermediate gear. It's only a 3/4 inch shaft that rides on the two roller bearing cages. These were found to be very weak, so sometime in the late 40s, early 50s, Dana changed it to an 1 1/8" shaft, which I don't have to show you because I don't have one that's like that. But that basically used the same cage bearings. The latest transfer case they made was an 1 1/4" shaft, which I have here. This is found all the way from the late 50s all the way to the final year of production. This is obviously much stronger in the fact that it rides on, here, I'll move the camera. It rides on hundreds of little needle bearings like this. These are actually the exact ones, and they're stacked in the cluster gear one by one with little washers, and it makes a bearing surface for this whole shaft. So if you're looking to do an engine swap or something on one of these Willys, definitely try to find the transfer case with the 1 1/4" shaft, because it'll be much stronger. So, all right, that concludes part 1. Y'all have a good one.